Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Sure.
Um, Today we're going to be talking about something that I think affects everyone
Yeah,
in some way, shape, or form, and that is personal finance.
absolutely.
And with me to help break down all things personal finance
Yes.
and give us the confidence to take control of our own financial journeys, we have an
Yes.
expert in the field.
I'm excited to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's interesting because when we think about personal finance, a lot of times we think
Yeah.
about restrictions. We think
Mhm.
about like, oh no, I can't buy that latte.
Right.
Or, maybe I can't go on that trip this year.
Right.
But really, I think at its core, personal finance should be about empowerment.
Yeah.
It should be about aligning your money with your values and really helping you to achieve your
It's
dreams.
about having a plan, right?
Exactly.
Instead of just kind of like floating along, hoping for the best.
100%.
We talk about budgeting, and I feel like that's everyone's least favorite word.
I know it has kind of a negative connotation to it,
Right.
but it's so important.
But it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Like what comes to mind for me is just like a spreadsheet
Yeah.
and like agonizing over,
Color coding.
yes,
Yeah.
spreadsheets, color coding, exactly.
Right.
But it's really not like that, or it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a chore.
Right.
I think a lot of people, when they first get into budgeting, they hear about that 50-30-20 rule.
Yes. 50-30-20, that's the one that I always hear.
Exactly. And it is a good starting point.
Yeah.
50% of your income for your needs,
Okay.
30% for your wants, and 20% for your savings and debt repayment.
So needs being like rent and bills and all of that.
Exactly. The essentials.
Okay.
Your housing, your transportation, your groceries, things like that.
Got it.
Your wants, that's where you get to have a little bit more fun,
So that's the latte.
That's the latte that's
Oh.
going out to eat with your friends.
Entertainment. Vacations, maybe.
Vacations, exactly.
Got it.
And then that 20% for your savings and debt repayment, that's really going to set you up for long-term financial success.
But you're saying that's just a starting point, though.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Okay.
Because everyone's financial situation is going to be different.
That's true.
So, for example, if you're someone who's aggressively paying down student loan debt,
Right.
you might want to adjust those percentages a little bit.
How did
Maybe
that-
you allocate a little bit more towards debt repayment
Okay.
and maybe a little bit less towards wants.
So it's more about understanding the principle behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about creating a spending plan
Okay.
that works for you and your goals.
So it can be flexible. It doesn't have to be like you're tied to this thing.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
It's all about finding that balance.
Okay.
Now, speaking of finding a balance, let's talk about that safety net,
Yes,
that emergency fund.
because emergencies happen.
They do, and they often happen at the worst possible time.
Right.
So it's not a matter of if an emergency is going to happen. It's
Yeah.
a matter of when.
It's about being prepared.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, think about things like a sudden job loss, medical emergencies, even those unexpected car repairs.
Yes.
These are all things that can really throw a wrench in your financial plans.
Yeah, they're always expensive, it seems like.
They never happen at a convenient time, right?
Never.
Yeah.
And they're never cheap.
No.
So how much should we actually be aiming for in our emergency fund?
Well, ideally, you want to have 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses saved.
Okay.
But I know that can seem like a really daunting amount,
It does.
especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah.
But even having a small cushion,
Right.
even a few $100s, can make a world of difference.
I remember when I first started out, even like saving $1,000 felt like a huge accomplishment.
It's a huge accomplishment.
It's a
Yeah.
journey. It's a
Absolutely.
journey, and you got to start somewhere.
Exactly. And that's what's important, taking
Yeah.
that first step.
Okay.
So once you've got that emergency fund in place, you can start thinking about how to make your money grow through investing.
Okay, so we've talked about budgeting.
Yes.
We've talked about emergency funds.
Yes.
Now we're moving into the investing,
Yes.
which can be a little intimidating,
I know, it can be,
for sure.
but it's really not as scary as it seems.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be.
Investing, for some reason, that word always just like makes me think that it's so much more complicated than it needs to be.
It can feel very overwhelming,
Yeah.
especially with all the jargon and,
Yeah.
different strategies and everything out there.
Yes, and I feel like everyone's always trying to sell you something.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big industry.
Right. So
Yeah.
how do we even break through the noise and figure out
Right.
what we actually need to know?
Well, I think at its most basic level, investing is really just about putting your money to work for you.
So instead of just sitting in a savings account,
Earning, like, no interest.
exactly,
Yeah.
you're putting it into assets that have the potential to grow over time.
Okay.
So things like stocks, bonds, real estate.
Okay, so it's about having your money make you more money.
Exactly. It's about building wealth over the long term.
Okay. And our sources mention index funds as a good starting point for new investors.
They are, and for good reason.
Okay.
Index funds are really great because they offer built-in diversification.
Okay, so instead of putting all our eggs in one basket like we were talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're spreading your money across hundreds or even thousands of different stocks or bonds.
Okay, so it's kind of like a low-risk way to get started.
It can be a much lower risk way to get started with investing than, say, picking individual stocks.
Okay. And are there different types of index funds?
There are. So, you have your stock index funds, which track a particular basket of stocks,
Okay.
like the S&P 500, for example.
Okay.
And then you have bond index funds, which focus on bonds. And each one is going to have a different level of risk and potential return.
So it's about finding the right fit for your risk tolerance
Exactly.
and your goals.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of
Yeah.
approach.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And now I think it's time we talk about the thing that no one likes to talk about.
Debt?
Debt.
Yes. The dreaded dread.
It feels so heavy.
It does.
Just even saying it.
It does, and I think there's a lot of shame
Yes.
surrounding debt in our society.
Yes, absolutely.
But the truth is, not all debt is created equal.
Right.
And in fact, some debt can actually be good debt.
Okay, that's interesting because everything tells us just get out of debt, get out of debt.
Right. And while it's certainly a good goal to pay down your debt,
Right.
it's also important to understand the different types of debt and how they can potentially work for you or against you.
So give me an example of like good debt versus bad debt.
Sure. So an example of good debt might be taking out a mortgage to buy a house. Because historically, real estate has appreciated in value over time.
Okay.
And so you're essentially investing in an asset that's likely to grow.
Right.
Plus, you get to live in it.
Right, exactly.
An example of bad debt would be like high-interest credit card debt,
Okay.
where you're essentially paying a premium to borrow money.
Right. And those interest rates are just,
They can be crippling.
yeah.
They can really hold you back from achieving your financial goals.
Okay, so it sounds like it's not just about getting out of debt. It's about being strategic about it.
Exactly. It's
About-
about understanding the interest rates,
Yeah.
understanding the terms of the debt,
Okay.
and making sure that it's working for you and not against you.
So how do we go about slaying those debt monsters,
Okay.
especially those high interest ones?
So there are two main methods that people talk about a lot.
Okay.
The snowball method
Yes, I've heard of that.
and the avalanche method.
Okay.
Have you heard of these before?
I've heard of the snowball method, but not the avalanche method.
Okay. So with the snowball method, you basically list out all your debts
Okay.
from smallest to largest, regardless of interest rate.
Got it.
And then you focus all your extra money on paying off the smallest debt first,
Okay.
while making minimum payments on everything else.
So you feel like you're getting a win.
Exactly. It's about building momentum.
Okay.
It's about feeling that sense of accomplishment.
I like that.
And then once that smallest debt is paid off,
Okay.
you take all that money you were putting toward it,
Got it.
and you roll it into the next smallest debt.
Oh, I see. Like a snowball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Okay.
Now, the avalanche method is a little bit different.
Okay.
With this method, you're prioritizing your debts
Okay.
based on the highest interest rate.
Okay.
So you're going to focus on paying down the debt with the highest interest rate first.
To save you money in the long run.
Exactly, because you're accruing the most interest
Got it. Okay.
on that debt.
So it's about like being more efficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the most mathematically efficient way to pay down your debt.
Okay. But it might take longer to like feel like you're making progress.
You might not see those quick wins
Right?
that you do with the snowball method,
Okay.
but in the long run, it can save you money on interest payments.
Got it. So it depends on like what motivates you.
Exactly what your priorities are.
So it's about figuring out what works for you and your own
Yeah,
like personality type almost.
exactly. Your financial personality.
Yeah.
Because some people really are motivated by those quick wins.
Right.
They want to see those small debts disappear quickly.
Yes.
And that keeps them motivated.
It's like checking things off a to-do list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas other people, they're like, just tell me the most efficient way.
Just tell me what to do.
Yeah, like let's just crunch the numbers and do what's going to save me the most money.
Exactly.
So, it really just depends on your own personal preferences.
Okay. This has been so eye-opening. I feel like we've covered so much today. We've talked about budgeting emergency funds, investing debt management.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot, but you know what? If I had to like sum it all up,
Yeah.
what would you say is the most important thing for people to remember when it comes to like managing their money or thinking about their personal finances?
That's a great question. I think if I had to pick one thing, it would be to just get started.
Okay.
It's so easy to get overwhelmed
Yes.
by all the information out there.
Yes.
And to feel like you need to have everything figured out
Right.
before you even begin.
Yeah, like I need to read all the books.
Yeah.
I need to
Yeah.
consult with all the experts.
Yeah, you need to become a financial expert overnight.
Yes. And I need to have tons of money to even get started.
All right, exactly. But the truth is, you don't need to know everything.
Okay.
You don't need to have a ton of money to get started.
Okay.
The most important thing is to just take that first step.
So start small.
Exactly.
Don't try to do everything at once.
Yeah, and be patient.
Okay.
It's a journey. It's not a race.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
I love that.
And I think the more you learn and
Yeah.
the more you implement these things into your life,
Yeah.
the more confident you're going to become.
So where can our listeners go if they want to learn more or they need help getting started?
Oh, there's so many great resources available.
Yeah.
There are financial advisors you can work with.
Okay.
There are tons of online tools and calculators.
Yeah.
And of course, there are amazing podcasts like this one.
Well, we won't toot our own horn too much, but
Well, just a little bit, just a little too.
I think you've given us a lot to think about today, and hopefully our listeners are feeling a little bit more empowered
Yes,
to take control of their own finances.
that's what I like to hear.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And for everyone listening, we'll see you next time for another deep dive.